followed by your message. And then, of course, the web chat is working right now at backchannel.tv. And if you're watching on YouTube, then you can use the comments section to stream there. So many ways to do it. No excuse not to. And if you've got a friend or family member that you think would like to be involved, and they haven't got a device, just tell them to look at the live stream on YouTube. It's easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So let's jump straight into the New York Times, because that's what we're doing. We're looking at the morning papers now for this Tuesday morning. It's the 7th of December. New York City to require companies to get staff vaccinated. This is the sweeping new mandate will apply to 184,000 private employers. New York City unveiled plans to require... Oh, it just jumped off my screen. There we go. To require all private businesses, employees at all private businesses, to multinational banks to get vaccinated. The most sweeping local mandate in the country, and one that's intended to limit the spread of the coronavirus variant this winter. Isn't it amazing that we're still talking about this? There was a brief period where coronavirus waned, like when people were really starting to get vaccinated and Delta was the dominant strain and the vaccines worked well on Delta and that was fine, and everybody was like, okay, we've got this now. And then, of course, boom, South Africa, Omicron, Europe, Omicron, now Canada, Omicron, and now 5 cases here in California. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? People were already traveling, already carrying it around the world. Researchers at a major hospital complex in Pretoria reported their patients with the coronavirus are much less sick than those that they've treated before, and that the other hospitals are seeing the same trends. In fact, they said most of their infected patients were admitted for other reasons and have no COVID symptoms. But scientists cautioned against placing too much stock in either the potential good news of less severity or bad news, like early evidence that prior coronavirus infection offers little immunity to Omicron. So until they get the data on how the vaccines are working on Omicron, really this is just a hypothetical conversation, isn't it? And it's not one that I want to really put fuel on the fire of, because I just recognize that we are living in a uncertain period now. We need data, we need science, we need facts. Enough with the ivermectin and the opinions. Hydroxychloroquine. Enough with the opinion. So that's quite interesting, of course, on the front of the New York Times, being a big story for New York. Early reports signal variant is less severe. South Africa observes encouraging signs. Well, that is good. It's good to know that is, where it's at. And if you want to chat and jump on, my live chat is live now, so you can, come and say hi. On Ukrainian front, wearily awaiting the worst, it says. Machine gun fire broke the stillness just after 8 p.m. when Captain Denis Brzezinski was midway through the evening patrol. The shots came in sporadic bursts and were close by, fired by Russian-backed separatists whose positions were obscured in the darkness. Only when the flash of a rocket-propelled grenade illuminated the newly fallen snow did Captain Brzezinski break his stride, briefly pausing to take cover before moving on. Yes, after 8 years of war, grim anticipation of a Russian invasion. Big story. US sues Texas for its redraw of voting map. Well, to me, this is like Merrick Garland finally grew a backbone. There's been a lot of criticism of the Attorney General for being a little too gentle. And I think a lot of people obviously want him to, take Donald Trump to task for staging a coup on the United States. And continuing to do it, I wouldn't mind, but it's like it didn't stop on January 6th. I watched the interview with him the other day on Fox, and it's like he's still peddling this lie. And the only reason he's doing it, I presume, is because if he's president, he can't be prosecuted. It says the Justice Department sued Texas on Monday over the state's plan to redraw its voting districts, saying it would essentially make ballots cast by Black and Latino voters count for less than those of others. In announcing the suit, Attorney General Merrick B. Garland said that the redistricting plan that the state's Republican-led legislature approved in October violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which says that voters cannot be denied equal access to their political process based on their race or ethnicity. The suit was the second in a little over a month to be filed by the Justice Department, challenging Texas over voting. The department sued the state in early November over a new voting law that it argued would disenfranchise Texans who do not speak English, people with disabilities, older voters, and those who live outside the United States. Basically, the GOP is trying to only make it possible for white, able-bodied people to vote. That's their plan. White, able-bodied people, the people most likely to vote for Republicans, and therefore anybody who might be doing shift work, working late, working early, who can't get time off to go to the polling place, invariably poorer people, invariably ethnic minority groups. It's done by stealth, it's done in a way that people can't directly say, well, that's racist. You see, it's this stealth thing. It's the same thing that the Nazis did in Germany, that they do it by stealth over time. And we have to be very clear about the fact that this is happening for no reason other than to cheat the future elections, both the midterms and then the next presidential election. It's to cheat the election. It's cheating. It's just cheating. Let's see what else is on the New York Times this morning. Pushing for self-driving Tesla, Musk downplayed tech limits. It says Elon Musk built his electric car company Tesla about the promise that it represented the future of driving, a phase emblazoned on the automaker's website. Much of that promise was centered on autopilot, a system of features that could steer, brake, and accelerate the company's sleek electric vehicles on highways. Over and over, Mr. Musk declared that truly autonomous driving was nearly at hand. The day when a Tesla could drive itself, and that the capability would be whisked to drivers over the air in software updates. However, unlike technologists at almost every other company working on self-driving vehicles, Mr. Musk insisted that autonomy could be achieved solely with cameras tracking their surroundings, but many Tesla engineers questioned whether it was safe enough to rely on cameras without the benefit of other sensing devices, and whether Mr. Musk was promising drivers too much about autopilot's capabilities. Now, those questions are at the heart of an investigation by the National Highway Safety Traffic Administration after at least 12 accidents in which Teslas use autopilot. I don't know that I would want a car that fully drives itself. I mean, my electric car does have what they call adaptive cruise control. Are you aware of this technology? It's where you set the car to drive in cruise control on the freeway at a certain speed. So the speed in this case would be 60, never more than 60. And you then use a camera, an onboard camera, which is on the front of the car. It's actually just behind the front mirror. So you can't really see it when you're driving because it's on the facing forward on the front of the mirror. And that camera is tracking the car in front. And so if the car in front slows down, it uses a kind of radar thing to bounce the beam off the back of the car in front. As the car in front slows down, your car slows down. So it means you can basically, instead of being stuck at 60, if the traffic slows, then the car slows. But I still have to steer. And that to me is like an essential part of this. The fact that I am having to steer, and consequently I still have to be in control of the vehicle at all times. It's just a more helpful way to do autonomous driving. I don't know that I would want the car to steer for me. I mean, I do like those cars that reverse park, the ones that can reverse park by themselves. That's kind of good, because some people just can't reverse park. For me, like, reverse parking is a emasculating skill. It makes me feel masculine. It's one of the few things in life that makes me feel masculine, because my taste in clothes and music certainly does not. But reverse parking makes me feel like, yeah, I nailed that. I don't know why it's connected to masculinity. It's the one of the few things I can say in life without fear of, cancel culture. That it's okay to say that reverse parking is something that gives me that sense of being masculine. I don't know why it is. I'm just telling you how I feel. Because most of the stuff I do makes me feel quite feminine, and I'm much happier in that genre. But I do feel that reverse parking has got a very male-dominated behavior. There's plenty of men that can't reverse park. I can. I can't drive forward very well, but I'm very good at driving backwards into a space and reversing around a hairpin bend with a blindfold on. US uses a diplomatic boycott of the Olympics to rebuke China. Yes, it says the United States will not send government officials to the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, a slap at China for human rights abuses. The diplomatic boycott allows American athletes to compete, but it is seen as an affront and one of President Biden's most public condemnations of Beijing. China said it would respond with resolute countermeasures. Well, surely all they can do is ban the American athletes from competing. That's a resolute countermeasure, isn't it? And that would be very disappointing. I personally don't think you can just say, okay, we're not sending our diplomats. You have to say, we're not going to compete. If you really, truly have disdain for the human rights abuses of China, then don't compete in the Olympics when it's in their back garden or front yard, as they say in America. I'm in America. Stacey, welcome to the YouTube version of this show. I'm pleased to see that you've jumped on YouTube and are messaging me. Yes, I am totally ready for the lunch hour. Thank you. Is the show any better from the YouTube perspective? I guess you can watch it slightly larger on the screen. You know, that's the worrying thing, isn't it? If you've got a big one, then you can see it on your big one. Okay, so that's kind of how the New York Times presents itself this morning. Let's jump to another one. What have we got here? We have got the Los Angeles Times now. They lead with Nunes to resign and join Trump. Yes, Devin Nunes, the little tyke, controversial San Joaquin Valley Republican and ardent supporter of Donald Trump, hence the rise of fascism, is leaving Congress by the end of the month to head a social media company created by the former president. I will deeply miss being your congressman, Nunes said in a message to his constituents on Monday. Shortly after he sent the note, Trump Media and Technology Group announced that Nunes, 48, would be its chief executive beginning in Janvier. Devin understands that we must stop the liberal media and big tech from destroying the freedoms that make America great, Trump said. Well, let me translate that statement for you into plain English from Trump language. Devin understands that we must stop the truthful reporting and large companies that have made a decision that they don't want to spread fascist lies and therefore prevented me from staying on their platforms from destroying the freedoms that make America white again. There you go. That's the translation. I mean, I was discussing yesterday with my mum, like, what's going to happen in America. And this is our conclusion. And mums are always right. You know that, don't you? Mums are always right. We're going to have what they had in South Africa for decades, which is a modern apartheid. And the apartheid is going to be between the red and the blue states. And people won't cross state lines unless they want to have an abortion. And states that are dominantly, dominant red states will remain red states. There'll be no flippage. And states that are dominant blue will remain blue states. There'll be no flippage. And these states will become ghettoized. And so the brown people will have to move out of the white states for fear of their lives and into the more welcoming democratic states. And the immigrants and the asylum seekers and anybody who is not white, xenophobic and racist. That's just a prediction. I'm not saying it's happening now. I'm just saying, well, it is kind of happening now. But I feel like apartheid is going to be the future word for America. That's what we're going to end up seeing. This separation of black and white, left and right. And it's already starting to happen. You go to, there's no other reason why, Trump wants to remain in West Palm Beach in South Florida. That's his ghetto. That's his safe space. Coincidentally, that's where Jeffrey Epstein lived with Ghislaine Maxwell. It's like this is the haunt for these types of people. There are some places that are bucking the trend, I'm pleased to say. Because, here's the thing. We only have the latest figures to go on, a combination of last year's census and a combination of the results from the election, which were that Biden got 7 million more votes than Trump, but Trump still had around 70 million votes for people. And my theory is if you voted for Trump, you believe in the rhetoric that he would describe. I honestly believe that. I used to make excuses for people and say, they just want to vote Republican or they don't want to vote Democrat. But no, I think that was fine in the 2016 election when you didn't really know what Trump was going to be about. Hillary Clinton did. Famously, she made that speech talking about, his racism and his xenophobia and corruption. She made that speech in advance of the 2016 election. And people were like, that's a bit of an overreaction. And it all came true. But in the 2020 election, you'd had 4 years of the racism and the xenophobia and the bigotry and the lies and the corruption. So you knew exactly what your vote was going toward. You knew exactly who Trump was. And unless you've been indoctrinated by watching right-wing media, which is only giving you his version of reality, the propaganda, then you're going to end up just voting blindly. Very interesting to me. Very interesting to me. So if you want a message about this, you know where I am. You can talk to your device. You can say the magic words and just wake up your device, then say, and then your message. You can also communicate via backchannel.tv. It's our chat facility. And that's, right there for you at all times. Youths facing mental health crisis, Surgeon General issues advisory to focus attention on problems made worse by pandemic isolation. It says, citing mounting evidence of ongoing harm, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy on Tuesday issued a public health advisory on mental health challenges confronting youths, a rare warning and call to action to address what he called an emerging crisis exacerbated by pandemic hardships. Yes, symptoms of depression and anxiety have doubled during the pandemic, with 25% of youths experiencing depressive symptoms and 20% experiencing anxiety symptoms, according to Murthy's 53-page advisory. I've actually had the opposite. I've really enjoyed the lockdown. And I think that just suits my personality, And some people don't like FaceTime. They just don't like doing a face-to-face video chat. It's just not who they are. It's all about who I am. I love a face-to-face FaceTime. That's why I'm enjoying talking to you right now. Because some of us are just naturally introverted, and our extrovert can only really present itself when we are in front of the camera rather than in person. So it just works for me, And maybe it works for you as well. Maybe the pandemic has inadvertently, outside of the health issues, given you the opportunity to really hunker down and think about what's important to you. And when it comes to relationships and the kind of friendships that we have, I personally believe they are just as accessible via FaceTime than they are in person. And it helps if, I don't really drink alcohol. So, some people like to go out for a drink and they need a couple of drinks in order to take the edge off of their personality so that they can truly relax and have a good time with people. And I never needed that. So for me, FaceTime is just as sociable as drinking in a bar. In fact, it's better because I don't have to go through that awkward process of pretending that I want to order an alcoholic drink when, of course, I really just want a cup of tea. I've never drunk. Drinking is like it's an unnecessary evil. People lean on it. But the reality is, it's like our body doesn't need it. Our brain certainly doesn't need it. Society doesn't need it. It's painfully addictive. It's always overly expensive, and it makes you fat. So, it's just not necessary. It's not necessary for me. I can get fat in other ways, quite happily. But I just feel like, I don't mind like half a glass of red wine, but like half a glass of red wine, like that is me done. Very happy with it. And I can make it last all night. But some people love to get absolutely wasted. It's just part of their culture. And I understand that. I'm not really critical of people who do that. I understand. Life is hard enough as it is without some kind of light substance abuse. It's just, humanity is so imperfect. Drinking just enables you to cope. And I honestly feel that. I'm not critical of that anymore. I just recognize everybody's different. Everybody has needs. And we need to respect the fact that some people can really only survive with a drink. I'm not going to turn around and go, you mustn't drink. Do what you like. But if it becomes an addiction that starts to affect you and isolates you from your family and you can't shake it, and you're drinking at home on your own, because I actually think that is a problem, people who drink at home alone. And I think going out for a drink socially is very different to drinking home alone. And that was really the kind of highlight of the pandemic, was how many people needed to drink at home. How many people actually needed to keep themselves sane with a drink. And plenty of people would be getting through like a lot. I find spirits the devil. I can't drink a spirit at all. I couldn't even put it in my mouth. A whiskey or a brandy or any of those substances, to me, they're like paint stripper. They're like commercial cleaning products. I have no interest or desire to ingest anything like that. To me, like which is the clear one, gin. To me, gin is no different to like an alcohol hand gel for cleaning your hands. To me, that's what these products are. If they were jellified, then they would just be like an alcohol gel. To me, alcohol gel tastes the same as whiskey or gin or vodka. And I think the reason that there are more and more people giving up alcohol is because it's all connected to like wanting to have some control in a world that is increasingly out of control. Do you not think? The planet is burning, and other than like not using the air conditioning and driving an electric car and trying to recycle and the little things that us mortals can do to try and save the planet, we really want to have some sense of control, and the way to do that is also not to eat meat, so we're not contributing to the kind of meat, the meat effects of climate change, and to stop drinking alcohol, so we are in a better position to make informed choices. And I actually think that's why there are people having less sex now. That's also being reported. Younger people who are abstinent or not celibate, but they just don't want to. They're just more thoughtful about who it is they're sleeping with. And that has changed as well. Just this idea of consensual relations, as opposed to what used to be the norm, which was drunken relations. You'd wake up with someone, you'd be like, how did I get here? And how am I going to get home? And why are my clothes on the ceiling fan? These are the things that hopefully are not happening as much now because people are making informed choices and more thoughtful about their partners and being fully consensual in every way and waiting, holding off, just getting to know someone. And I also think the pandemic meant that, hopefully there was less kind of physical interplay anyway because of the nature of lockdown. It's 9:29. This is Backchannel here on the West Coast. I'm Anthony Davis. I'm in California. It's the Anthony Davis Show. On the East Coast, it's 12:29, and it's the 7th of December. The 7th Advent calendar door has been opened, and the 7th chocolate has been ingested by children all around the world, including my kids, my son is pretty much allergic to sugar, makes him very ill, and still continues to ingest it and then feel terribly unwell. It's a horrible thing to watch, but it just is what it is. You can't take candy from a baby, as they say in that famous song. What song was that? Was that a Frankie Valli song? Maybe. Sentence Suu Kyi was already in the rearview mirror on the front of the LA Times this morning. In Singapore, it says the international condemnations poured in swiftly over Monday's sentencing of one-time democracy symbol Aung San Suu Kyi and caught in military-ruled Myanmar. But in reality, the 76-year-old Nobel laureate is no longer the prime torchbearer for the country's democratic aspirations. Carla, do you remember when Aung San Suu Kyi was in prison and a famous British radio DJ became her pen pal? Do you remember this? She was a hero, and arguably she's still a hero. She's still a hero. But if you look up, he was known as the Hairy Cornflake. Do you remember? We had a famous DJ called the Hairy Cornflake, and he this is such a stupid story. He became obsessed because he fancied her. He was a bit of a predator in many ways, and he fancied her. It was Dave Lee Travis. And so he would write to her during her imprisonment and forge this relationship with her. And if you look at the video, I know you can't comprehend this, can you, Carla? I love the fact that every day I bring you a story where you're like, where did that come from? Right? And if you search the video of the moment that Suu Kyi is released from imprisonment in Singapore, who is there? Who is standing right there, and who comes up and gives her the weirdest kiss, like on the hand, like tries to go for her lips, like this woman has been incarcerated, and the Hairy Cornflake, Dave Lee Travis, is waiting for her, like had travelled there because he actually thought he stood a half a chance of like being her boyfriend. This old hairy radio host. So if you can find the video clip of her coming out of prison and being met by this small entourage, Dave Lee Travis, this British radio host, is there. And it's really, really weird. Kisses her hand, and you can see that he's like, whoa. It's so embarrassing. So embarrassing. I just thought I'd throw that in there because whenever I read about Aung San Suu Kyi, I think about the British connotation, which was that, 9,000 miles away is this hairy cornflake radio DJ character who's got a bit of a thing for her. Carla can't believe it. She's like, how do you, on one hand, have Aung San Suu Kyi and then on the other hand have Dave Lee Travis, and how do the two ever come together? Was it that he genuinely had genuinely cared for the cause, or was it that he kind of idolized her in some way? Jessica's just messaged and says that she's struggling to connect with Backchannel on her Echo Show device today. So that's the latest out of Myanmar. The civilian leader who was pushed aside in a de facto coup in the Southeast Asian nation this year was convicted of 2 charges and given a 4-year prison sentence that was quickly reduced to 2 years of what's believed to be house arrest. It says deposed Myanmar President Win Myint was also convicted of 2 charges and given a reduced 2-year sentence under house arrest, state-owned media reported. Western governments and international human rights groups blasted the legal proceedings against Suu Kyi as a sham and emblematic of the country's ruling generals to reverse what had been seen as a fitful progress towards democracy in recent years until a military junta again took over in February. So there it is. That's the front of the LA Times on this Tuesday morning. It's 9:34 here on the West Coast. 9:34. Oh, how QAnon hijacked Hollywood narratives is also on the front of the paper. It says, where we go one, we go all. Screenwriter Todd Robinson wrote this catchy line for the 1996 movie White Squall, a male-bonding tale directed by Ridley Scott about teenage boys and their hard-nosed captain played by Jeff Bridges, who learn about life and loyalty sailing a 1911 brigantine through a deadly storm. The motto was roughly engraved on the vessel's bell, which served as the emotional heart of the story. And now you've put me off. Now I've even lost my place. This is like an eye test now because I'm using a screen that's so far away. Like I've tried to stop using my iPad because I kept looking down, so I'm trying to look like over here. But this is like an eye test for a man who can barely see with glasses, let alone without them. Anyway, Robinson, even with a writer's mind, never imagined that a quarter century later, those 7 words will be the rallying cry of QAnon, a global conspiracy theory that seeks to undermine American democracy. Q followers entirely misunderstood and abused the actual point, Robinson said in a recent email interview with The Times. He said, "I prefer to have my words kept in the context they were created for, imposing unintended meaning on art. But in this case, it's been hurtful and is untrue." There it is. Where we go one, we go all. That's the phrase. The phrase that pays. Let me just check on your messages. Excellent. I would actually go as far as to say that, the Echo Show devices. Oh, Sonny's here. Welcome. Sonny says, Kate Cocker says you're pretty cool, so here I am to tune in and say hello. Well, hello, Sunny. I'm very grateful for this. He says, oh no, Jeff Bridges being tarnished by the big Q. My eyes are terrible, so I totally relate to your struggle with seeing text. I can't see anything, even with these fantastic new glasses that I got. They look like I'm in a laboratory, like doing experiments. Someone said that to me once. They say, are those lab glasses? It's like, no, they're not lab glasses. But, if you think they are, then fine. That's fine. We're going to go to Connecticut now and take a look at the Norwalk Hour. Is there a newspaper for Utica? I'd be interested to look at that. Utica, which is in mid-state New York. Maybe Carla can find one and then I can review the local Utica paper and see what's happening in that fascinating part of the world. School's employee on leave for allegedly making racially insensitive comments. This is from the Connecticut this morning. It says the city's public schools have placed Nathan Hale Middle School employee on administrative leave following allegations the individual used racially insensitive language. Norwalk Public Schools became aware of the concerning allegations last week, according to Brenda Wilcox. Williams, Chief of Staff and Communications. The employee was immediately placed on administrative leave. But what did he say? I want to know what he said. What did he say? I want to know what he said. What did he say? It says, although we consider the personal matters to be confidential, we take this opportunity to be clear that we have zero tolerance for racial insensitivity and take seriously our responsibility and commitment to maintaining an environment in which everyone feels welcome. But what did he say? What did he say? Tell us what he said. What did he say? What was racially insensitive that he said? Let us decide on whether or not he was racially insensitive. I mean, I'm sure he was, obviously, because he's been suspended. But it's very interesting to me. You know, if somebody behaves in a way that is racially insensitive, you have to call it out. And how do you call it out? You let everyone know what they said. If you don't mention what they said, then you're never going to educate people into knowing what is right and what is wrong. I think when it's all very general and like unspoken, then people never really understand. We were talking about cancer yesterday, and I was saying that, you know, in my youth, my parents and family never said the word cancer. They just wouldn't say the word. And it's very interesting to me that now we can talk about it with confidence and we understand it. We know what cancer is and how it grows and how we can prevent it. But they didn't know that stuff back then. And they always thought the whole thing was down to cigarettes. They didn't consider that food might have an issue as well. And that's because it was an unspoken evil. And, you know, keep your enemies close. Your friends close, but your enemies closer is the phrase, right? And if cancer is the enemy, keep it close. And if racism is the enemy, keep it close. Learn the words, know what people are saying, and tell people what it is that is wrong. Because, you know, I have a racist landlord who's a very nice man. He doesn't even know he's being racist. When he refers to Ilhan Omar as a raghead, he doesn't know that that's racist, because to him, there's nothing vile about that language. But he doesn't understand that culture has changed and that those words are inappropriate in the same way as Lauren Boebert referring to Ilhan Omar as not wearing a backpack and then we're all safe, you know, making a reference to being a suicide bomber because she's a Muslim and she wears a hijab. And thinking, and this is what the radical right are doing now, the far right are doing now, is that they're saying things where the individual words themselves, backpack, are not bad words. And they're like, was nothing to do with me, I didn't say anything bad. But when you put back and pack into a sentence with which infers a suicide bombing because somebody happens to be a Muslim, a follower of Islam as a word translated is peace. Peace. What Lauren Boebert is doing is not peaceful. What she's doing is she is stoking racial inequality. She's trying to divide people. And so this is the problem we have in society now, is that we need to actually know what the words are. A little bit like with the Me Too movement, like when we learned that Harvey Weinstein would like get these actresses into his hotel room and lie on a bed in a robe and ask them to invited them over to massage him. That was the point at which the actress would probably have been best to leave. Be like, this isn't happening. Oh, it's just a massage. It's not rude. It's just a massage. And the problem is, if you don't highlight the crime, then other actresses won't know to look out for Harvey's massage routine, in the same way that other recipients of Islamophobia won't know to look out for people who are inappropriate, like my landlord, who doesn't realize that raghead is not acceptable. So when my landlord used that phrase, I didn't ignore it or giggle, as we might have done in the past, you know, just, oh, ignore him, he doesn't know. I called him out, and I said, racist landlord, you can't say that. It's not acceptable anymore. And again, his attitude is rag and head. How is that racist? And it's like it's the connotation. It's the placement in the sentence. And it's your attitude. And it's those things which are institutional and systemic racism. Overt racism, we know the N-word is overt racism. But systemic racism can only really be defined as this stealth-like racism where it's just part of the vernacular. Not necessarily the nasty words, but inferring that Ilhan Omar is a suicide bomber because she's got a backpack. Or in the case of Lauren Boebert, saying she didn't have a backpack so she can get into the elevator because she's safe. It turns out she made the whole thing up. Ilhan Omar had never even come into contact with Lauren Boebert and said to her, or she announced that whenever she sees Lauren Boebert just puts her head down and walks in the other direction. And so this is where we find ourselves now, in a kind of society where this stuff is not said overtly. And it's way more dangerous. Systemic racism is way more dangerous than overt racism. Because overt and outright racism is very clear. You can spot the racist, whether they're wearing a hood and performing a lynching, or whether they are using inappropriate traditional racist language, like the N-word, in a malicious way. But what we're looking at here now is this very dangerous stealth-like and systemic racism where people just think it's funny to talk in a certain way about certain groups of people. And it ain't funny. And it needs to end. But it will only end if places like Hale Middle School in Norwalk, Connecticut, publish what the guy said. Publish it. So thank you if you just joined us. Sunny says, I've got optic nerve hypoplasia, so my issue is faulty wiring. Oh, I see, in your eye, yeah. He said, I can understand being in a marginalized group and not wanting to hear slurs, some ignoramus said, but I also agree it's important to call it out. It is. I mean, that's just my view, is that anything you hear now from anybody, whether it be racism or sexism or bigotry or Islamophobia or ageism or fatism or any of the things where people are disrespected in conversation, don't just overlook it or ignore it or think, oh, well, he doesn't know because he's 75 and he'll be dead soon. That's what he'll be dead soon. Because there's a whole new generation of racists coming through the training ranks, the children of the racists invariably become racists. It's a little bit like the children of alcoholics become alcoholics. Because we replicate the behavior of our parents in a way that is entirely subconscious. And I was told this when I got done by the police in England for holding my phone while I was driving. And the story is, you'll never believe this story, right? Let me explain what happened. The babysitter came over and she was panicking. I've left my phone somewhere. I think I dropped it when I was walking the dog. And I said, well, look, you look after my daughter and I will use Find My iPhone. And then we logged in on my phone to find her iPhone. And it was bleeping where it was. So I drove, holding the phone, following the map to find her iPhone, which I thought was in the street. She thought she'd dropped it. And it turned out she'd actually left it in her apartment. It was bleeping in her apartment. But before I'd got to the apartment, I drove past the police station where there was a bunch of police officers outside the police station. They saw me holding the phone. And funnily enough, when they pulled me over, I said, look, I'm trying to find the phone. And they actually went off to try and find the phone themselves for her. But they still did me, hit me with a ticket. And I had to go on a driving course, one of these. You have a choice. You either take the points on your license or you go on a driving course to kind of remind you not to be such an idiot, which I was very happy to do. And the driving instructor said, and this I thought was very poignant, stuck with me. He said, what age are people when they learn to drive? And a few people put their hands up, said 16 or 17 or, and he goes, wrong. He goes, 3. I was like, what are you talking about? Learn to drive when you're 3. He said, trust me, if you have kids sitting in the back of your car and you're driving and you are an erratic driver or you have road rage or anything like that, you are teaching your children that that's how you drive. So the example that you are setting and the way that you drive is happening from their very earliest years. So I'm very conscious now when I drive my children that I drive slowly and respectfully. And when they say, "Daddy, can you do turbo boost?" which is because the electric cars, they have very instant torque, and boom, you just can go off. I say, no, it's not safe. It's not safe to do it now. And they're beginning to understand. And I never have road rage because I'm not that type of a person. But some people are very aggressive behind the wheel. And if there are children in the back, they're going to see it. It's 11 minutes before 10 on the West Coast, 11 minutes before 1 Eastern. And this is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. Just looking at the front of the Norwalk Hour this morning for Connecticut, CT raised mold levels for medical pot at one lab, emails show. This is Connecticut approving an increased limit of mold and yeast allowed in medical marijuana at one of the state's 2 cannabis testing labs through private emails last year. Interesting. City planning to sue condo association over debris near school. They need to do the right thing and remove the stuff. Don't you just love a local newspaper? And dentist ends year of giving with toy drive. This is in the spirit of giving back this holiday season. One of the town's newer community members, Dr. Maria Marlin, is continuing with her charitable ways with the organization of a holiday toy drive. Isn't that nice? That's just to bribe kids to go to the dentist, isn't it? It's like, please come to the dentist. Jessica says the Observer Dispatch. That's the local paper there. Is that the one we have? Can we find the right. So the is it called the Ithaca Journal? Oh, that was you being funny because it sounded a bit like Utica. Oh, I see. So the Times Union's in Albany. I hope this is close enough for you. The headline is 80 years hence, still a day of infamy. American flags fly alongside the graves of veterans at the Gerald B.H. Solomon National Cemetery in Schuylerville on Monday. Tuesday will mark the 80th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Japanese planes destroyed or damaged 19 U.S. warships and 300 aircraft, killing more than 2,400 people. State halts elective surgeries. This is Albany Medical Center and its associated hospitals. Saratoga Hospital and Glen Falls were among its list of 32 facilities that are to limit non-essential surgeries, according to the State Department of Health. The restrictions begin Thursday and they remain in place for at least 2 weeks. And the decision comes in response to a growing crisis of staffed bed availability at hospitals, most of which are upstate, as facilities grapple with the surge in COVID-19 patients, the majority of whom are unvaccinated. How are people still unvaccinated? I mean, you have to blame the media, right? The media is the reason why people are unvaccinated. The fact that the media is allowing some opinion to be the prevalent and dominating force. And if people are just watching Fox News, there's a very good chance that they'll think that vaccination is not healthy. But I think the message from government about vaccination has been very consistent. I don't think that, I think the government messaging on mask wearing and lockdowns has been inconsistent, but I think the messaging on vaccination has been very clear from most governments, and that is go and get the hell vaccinated. And now they're all saying go get the hell boosted, because of course we're discovering that if you had your vaccine more than 6 months ago, your second shot, then it's going to start to wane and you need to get boosted. I like to refer to myself as triple vaccinated now. Carla, are you triple vaccinated? Oh, you're not over 40. Oh, I see. That's the reason. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they're going to change it. They'll just get everybody done. I mean, I'm actually taking my daughter to be vaccinated tomorrow, who's 6 years of age. And guess what I've done to make it easier for her, because she's terrified? I have booked a flu jab at exactly the same time, same day, same clinic. So they can jab me first with the flu vaccine, and then they can give her the COVID vaccine. And she said, oh, if you get yours first, then I'll be okay. And I actually quite like, I quite like immunization. I kind of get off on it. I'm like, stick me. That's good daddy planning, that is, you know? Planning a flu shot on the same day as the same time as your kid's shot, that's good daddy planning. Netflix playing games adding tax to your bill, as the headline states. See streaming giant's new service as a software will get a cut. What does that mean? If you have a Netflix subscription, and let's face it, who doesn't, you may have recently received an email telling you that starting December 15, they'll be adding sales taxes to the monthly bill. Oh, interesting. That's because the online streaming company in November said it would start adding games to their package. And while streaming videos like movies or TV series remain exempt from state and local taxes, games are not, thus the change. That's interesting. So the cost of Netflix will be going up for some. Sunni chief's removal urged on the front of the Times Union in Albany, New York. It says more voices are joining the call for the State's University of New York's embattled Chancellor, James Malatraz, to step down or be removed from his role in light of a 2019 text message that revealed bullying conduct on behalf of Governor Andrew Cuomo. The texts were included in the latest batch of documents associated with the State Attorney General's investigation into claims by 11 women that disgraced former governor had sexually harassed them. What did he say, though? What did he say? Why are they doing this again? Don't just be like, tell us what he said. Let's call it out. It says Assembly Higher Education Committee Chairwoman Deborah Glick, a Manhattan Democrat, said in a statement on Monday, it's critical that students and their families have confidence in that their college experience will be free of sexual harassment and bias of any kind. What did he say? What did he say? I do not believe that recent revelations of the Chancellor's involvement in defaming those who were accused of former governors of sexual harassment can in any way assure students and families that commitment to harassment-free environment will be honoured, especially in instances a prominent member of the university faces credible. What did he say? What did he say? I just don't understand the point of reporting these stories if you're not going to say what they said. To me, that's not journalism. It's the whole linchpin of the story is what did he say? They leave it out. Unbelievable. I mean, this is just, modern journalism. Leave out the whole point of the story. I think what it is people are too scared to repeat it. That's what it is. They're just they think that by repeating it, they are in some way contributing to the crime. And the reality is that it's the other way around. You're providing evidence so the people democratically can make up their own mind whether or not that was inappropriate. And if they didn't think it was inappropriate, they should know that it is, and they should think about why it is. But only if they know what was said. Makes no sense to me. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. It's coming up on 10 o'clock here on the West Coast, and it's also coming up on 2 o'clock Eastern. No, 1 o'clock Eastern. There you go. It's the 7th of December. Merry Christmas, by the way. Christmas is just around the corner. I'm a huge fan of the Christmas. Always have been. Just think it's such a great time to, eat and be merry. I'm thinking of dressing up like an elf on Saturday. It's just a consideration at the moment. Might go to Target and see if they've got any elf pajamas left over. Apparently it's not good for your elf, but I'm going to give it a go. Dad jokes. because I'm a dad. No complaints. Carlo, should we try the US news update? Is that loaded and primed? Because, it's coming up for 10 and it's a good, halfway through the show opportunity to, hear a little bit of the top of our news. This is a podcast that I do every day for the Volley Network, which is basically 2 minutes of news from the United States. And so if you're here with me in the US and you want to know what's happening, then this is your chance to kind of get all of that in 2 minutes. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts from, on iTunes and, wherever you get your podcast. But it's called US News Update with Anthony Davis. And it's Monday through Friday. So, you get the weekends off. I mean, really, I get the weekends off, but you get the weekends off as well. From listening to me talking about the saddest and most desperate stories of the day. Because this is the problem when you work in the news. It's never good news. Anyway, here it is, the US News Update. It's Tuesday. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US News Update. I'm Anthony Davis. From big Wall Street banks to corner grocery stores, all private employers in New York City will have to require their workers to get vaccinated against COVID-19, the mayor announced on Monday, in the most sweeping vaccine mandate of any state or big city in the US. The move by Mayor Bill de Blasio came as cases are climbing again in the US, and the worrisome but little understood Omicron variant is gaining a toehold in the nation's largest city and elsewhere around the country. The measure will apply to roughly 184,000 businesses not covered by previous vaccine mandates, ranging from multinational corporations to mom-and-pop businesses in the city of 8.8 million people, according to a spokesperson for the mayor. The city's private sector workforce is 3.7 million. The United States will not send government officials to the 2022 Winter Olympics due to China's human rights atrocities, the White House said on Monday, after Beijing threatened unspecified countermeasures against any diplomatic boycott. President Joe Biden said last month he was considering such a boycott amid criticism of China's human rights record, including what Washington says is genocide against minority Muslims in its western region of Xinjiang. Meanwhile, the U.S. Justice Department sued Texas on Monday, alleging the state violated the Voting Rights Act by creating redistricting plans that intentionally discriminate against black and minority voters by minimizing their voting strength. Your daily US News Update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. Welcome back. There you go. That was the US News Update. I know you were talking about prep, Carla. I just was adding that off the back of a different thought. Two different thoughts. Carla and I were communicating. She's in London, I'm in Los Angeles, and we're communicating through the internet together. And, I really feel like, the other thing I was thinking, Carla, and this might sound a bit of a strange thing to say at this point, but I think that the 5 gigahertz network is working better than the 2.4 gigahertz network. And that's why your phone is working fine on FaceTime, because it's running on 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and your computer is running on 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and that's not working so well. So you might want to look into that. I'm very good at this stuff. I'm like a private investigator for technology. Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that 5 gigahertz is a faster network. And that's what phones use. And 2.4 gigahertz is a slower network, and that's what laptops use. And so that's why your phone is doing an excellent job of this communication. No breakup, no delay. Whereas the computer, 2.4 gigahertz, not so easy. So yes, a wire. Can't you buy just 150-foot Ethernet cable and just throw it up to their window? This is the problem of, this modern technology. It's all good. It's all good. We've got it down. So thank you very much for your messages. So many people getting in touch here on the YouTube feed and on the chat facility. Suni says, I'm proudly fully vaccinated. Yeah, but does that mean 3 shots or does it mean 2 shots? I was thinking about this the other day. To say fully vaccinated is fine if you got your second shot recently, but if you got it 6 months ago, then you're not fully vaccinated anymore. The goalposts have moved. You need your booster. I love the fact that whoever got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is now being encouraged to get one of the other vaccines as a booster because they've realized that the J&J one is like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay, but yeah, you really need the other one. And that's why I felt lucky that I got Moderna, because Moderna is the one that has proved the greatest efficacy against the Delta variant. Omicron. It's a word you never thought you would say, and now it's literally on everybody's lips. It's very funny to me. Let's go back to our little running order and see what's happening here. We've got a couple more newspapers to do. I was going to do the what is that? Acadiana Advocate? Is that a newspaper from Lafayette, Louisiana? I love these. I'm learning words here about, states that I've never heard of. Legislators reject vaccination ban. It says here, Louisiana lawmakers voted on Monday to reject the Governor John Bell Edwards' proposal to require students to get vaccinated against COVID-19 before entering school. Unbelievable. Though the Democratic governor has said he intends to override legislative rejection and move forward with adding the vaccine to the state immunization schedule. Following an hours-long oversight hearing chock full of misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines, the Louisiana House Committee on Health and Welfare voted 13-2 to oppose the rule, with a string of mostly Republican lawmakers labeling it a form of government overreach that infringes on parental choice, despite Louisiana's exceptionally broad opt-out provisions. I mean, I find I really have to temper my language here, the way I feel about this, because it's like they're just idiots. It's only a vaccination. It's not a reprogramming of your entire genetic codes to force you to vote Democrat. That's what they're told it is. This is why they're behaving like this. It's nothing to do with freedom and liberty. It's because somebody dropped some conspiracy theory suggesting that there's some microchip in there that is going to make you vote Democrat. Or you're being tracked. Well, I've got news for you. If you've got a cell phone, you're being tracked. So get rid of your cell phone first and then take the vaccine. It's just a vaccine, for goodness sake. It's not like this. It's not like they're asking everybody to get breast augmentation or get their hair dyed or, or even, if you want to take an even more extreme version for people to be branded, like they did with Jews in concentration camps, giving them a number on their forearm. It's a vaccination. You had your mumps, your measles, your rubella, your polio, your tetanus injections. What's the big deal? It's just misinformation that has forced people to think that this is some kind of conspiracy, that has converted regular, ordinary, free-thinking people into being this kind of right-wing army. They don't care for freedom or liberty. If they cared for freedom and liberty, then they would all take the vaccine, because then that enables the entire country and the world to be free. This is not freedom. Saying I don't want the vaccine is not freedom, because there is a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic. And therefore you cannot pretend for a second that we can't all be part of the solution. We have to be. There's been nearly 13,000 deaths in Louisiana and over 613,000 cases. It says, under the rule as proposed by the Louisiana Department of Health, students 16 and older beginning in the 2022-23 school year would be required to show proof of vaccination against COVID-19 or submit a written exemption to attend public schools, colleges, and universities. Younger age groups would be added as the U.S. Food and Drug Administration expands full licensure. There we are. Advocates warn of rising homelessness. Another story there on the front of the Acadiana Advocate. Acadiana? Maybe it's the Acadiana. Acadiana. A Cadiana. How would you say that? A Cadiana advocate. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I mean, if you know, then maybe you can let me know. I don't know how you'll let me know. It's hard to... A Cadiana. Yeah. Reports cite evictions, rising rent and home prices. This is the homeless population and those who are insecure for housing weathered a perilous 2021 following a brutal 2020. What's next? Fewer resources, perhaps, and more challenges. Well, this is because of the cost of living is high and wages are low. I mean, that's the reason we have homelessness. It's the reason the whole system is broken, is because wages should be, considering the cost of living, wages, you should be earning $50 an hour, not $15 an hour. That's what it should be. It's the same in England. In England, it should be £60 or £50 or £60 an hour. That's what people should be earning as a minimum wage. £50 or £60 an hour in order to pay to live a normal life. But if you were to follow a cleaner who's being paid £8 an hour, if you were to follow that cleaner home on 3 buses that they would have to take because they can't afford a car, they're probably living like 14 to an apartment because wages are so low. This is called relative poverty. Well, it's actually called poverty. Relative poverty is something slightly different. But the point is that, we've normalized poverty, and yet the people that make our laws, they're all millionaires. They live in these wonderful homes and they have these wonderful lives and they have absolutely no bearing on reality. No empathy for what it's like to live on regular wages. It's a tragedy. COVID restrictions in place for NO Bowl and Prep Classic. Superdome requires proof of vaccination or negative test. Yes, there's a lot of excitement throughout the area after the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, Ragin' Cajuns and the Westgate High School Tigers punched their tickets to New Orleans with victories this past week. But both games will be at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans, where there are stricter rules than other Louisiana cities regarding indoor facilities and large gatherings. Good. I mean, every restaurant here now. I went to a diner yesterday. The diner, before you come in, you have to show ID, proof of vaccination, and be wearing a mask. Just to go into a diner. Good. I'm so pleased. I mean, interestingly, I was with my stepfather, and he literally just flew in the day before, and he didn't have his paperwork on him. And somehow they let him in. He said, "No, I've just got off a plane." That would be the moment at which I'd say, "Okay, please, I don't want you in here with your Omicron." But no, they were like, "Come in, order Eggs Benedict." Interesting. The Portland Press-Herald is next on our list. COVID patient counts spike again. Pressure builds on Maine hospitals. I've actually been to Portland, Maine. It's one of the few places outside of the obvious that I've been to. And I enjoyed Portland, Maine a lot, but I didn't see any black people or brown people or people that weren't white and a little bit scary. That was my immediate experience. And I went for like the lobster festival because, Maine lobster is a very big thing and delicious, completely delicious. And at least the lobsters are orange. Well, they start out white and then they go orange when you cook them, which is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Mind you, I probably go orange when you cook me too. It says the number of COVID patients hospitalized in Maine jumped to a new high on Monday, an apparent result of a post-Thanksgiving spike on top of the outgoing surge fueled by the more contagious Delta variant of the disease. There were 361 patients in Maine hospitals on Monday morning, including 112 people in ICU and 60 patients on ventilators. That is a lot. And still, because it's a red state, people are refusing to wear masks, refusing to take precautions, and all they're doing, do you know what they're doing? They're just killing Republicans. That's really what they're doing. Because Democrats aren't dying because they're vaccinated. So they're just, Republicans so stupid that they don't understand that by doing these conspiracy theories, that they are going to reduce their numbers and therefore have less chance of getting their future presidential candidates into the White House? Or do they not care because they've rigged the state legislatures and the gerrymandering so much in their favor that they're going to cheat their way to the ballot box anyway? I mean, we have to consider all of these options. But if you knew that there was a deadly virus that could kill people, why would you spread misinformation about vaccines so that your own political people choose not to get vaccinated and therefore are bearing the brunt of the death rate? Only 68% of people in Maine have been vaccinated. 68%. It's not enough. It's got to be 100%. Now, I was talking earlier about the whiteness, making America white again, and the fear of the white man because of the diminishing demographics. This is partly to do with this is my feeling about why we have this whole xenophobic movement. Is because the white man is frightened. I say white man, it's invariably men, isn't it? Invariably. Their wives are just dragged along to these, white people parties. Well, here's some good news on the front of the newspaper in Portland, Maine, the Portland Press-Herald. It says South Portland selects first Somali-American mayor in the U.S. Yes. It's South Portland, incidentally. It's not Portland proper, South Portland. So not almost. Somalia was on the verge of civil war when Dakar Dalak fled the capital city of Mogadishu 31 years ago and began her journey to become the first Somalian-American mayor in the United States. On Monday afternoon, she was formally seated at the top elected leader of Maine's fourth largest city. Her latest accomplishment was the subject of a joyous phone conversation on Sunday with her mother, who still lives in Mogadishu. Her mum recalled the prayer she recited to Dalak when her daughter began high school. From now through eternity, her mother said at the time, be a leader in a community of people from all backgrounds, and may the light of your father guide you to a better future. Dalak had forgotten her mother's prescriptive words. She was happy to be reminded. So there we are. She served 3 years as District 5 City Councillor and then formally elected Mayor on Monday. It can be done. I'm glad that a little girl who looks like me will see me and think, I can do that too, she said. So, I don't want to be too critical of division and how it's impossible. But my other fear is that, as wonderful as it is that Decker Dalak at the age of 53 has been, given the role of mayor, there are an increasing number of racists with firearms who are going to take umbrage upon this. And this is my fear for Ilhan Omar and the rest of the squad, as they call themselves, Alexandria Cortez. These people are putting themselves out there, and they're putting themselves out there in front of white supremacists who invariably are weaponized. They're very brave. The bravery is not just about, stepping forward as an ethnic minority, but stepping forward in front of a firing squad, potentially. Because there are people out there who, and also, look at the Carl Rittenhouse case. You can go out there with your semi-automatic AR-15 style assault rifle and not be prosecuted for executing 2 people. Or traditionally police officers, until Derek Chauvin, could just murder ethnic minority groups and get away with it. And all they do at the very worst is lose their job. Isn't it weird how, being fired is considered a punishment in America? Being fired from your job as a police officer, that's considered the punishment for taking another person's life. Wittingly. And whether you're kneeing on the neck of a man for 7 or 8 or 9 minutes, or whether you're shooting somebody in the back who's running away from you fearing for their life, It's all the same, isn't it? I think it's very important that we talk about these things time and time and time again. We have to remind ourselves that this is our modern reality. But we also mustn't forget that there is some really positive integrational events happening, such as Dalek, sorry, in Portland, Maine, South Portland, Maine. City Council to reconsider licensing plan for shelters, it says. The Portland City Council voted unanimously on Monday night to reconsider a new licensing program for emergency shelters. So that's another story on the front of the Portland Press Herald. What else do we have? Regulators monitoring lawsuits by contractor, CPM parent. CMP parent, don't really know much about that. Oh, it's Central Maine Power. Okay, that's their power service. So I think we'll give it a rest with those now because, we've done a lot of newspapers and we do have some more deeper conversations to have about deeper stories. I have it all lined up here. But if you want to get involved, then be my guest. You can just jump on the conversation. You can wake up your device. You can say echo or whatever the default wake-up word is, followed by say and then your message. Now, Volley has a growing list of shows, including Haley and Allison live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs, and their one-star cinema review, Carla. Or Live Every Day with Liv Harrison, live from Texas, celebrating the little things in life with plenty of coffee. Or what about the charming and funny Hal Rudnick, whose program, Your Pal Hal, directly follows this broadcast at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, here on Backchannel. Yesterday I mentioned this story about electronic tagging. They call it e-carceration. It's a new way of imprisoning people, but in their own homes. And I've been thinking about this a lot ever since I heard a story on the radio about it the other day. The statistic that really chimed with me was the fact that 50% of people who are in the probation service are e-carcerated as opposed to incarcerated. They are wearing an electronic monitoring device, monitoring curfews and conditions of a court or a prison order. And if you're given a tag, it will usually be attached to your ankle. A monitoring unit will also be installed in a place stated in your court or prison, usually your home. Court or prison order, usually your home. And if you breach your conditions, you could be taken to court. The court can change your conditions, which could mean you're taken back into custody. So far, so good. But there is a dark side to all of this, and we're not being given the whole story. And there's a lot of analysis that has gone on about this. They call it a grey area of electronic monitoring in the USA. Interesting. This tells the story of James Gilmore offering his personal insight into the political and economic forces driving expansion of electronic monitoring in the United States. And if you'll forgive me for a couple of minutes, I'm going to read you this story in a reclined position because this is one of those stories that I think deserves a little reclination, if indeed that is a word. Is reclination a word? I don't know, I just made it up. He says, my interest in doing research on electronic monitoring started with a phone call. At 2 o'clock one morning in early 2010, my then 96-year-old mother phoned to say she was having chest pains, thought it was a heart attack and had already called emergency services. The ambulance was on the way. The hospital where she would end up was a 10-minute drive from my house. My natural reaction was to hop in the car and meet her there. Instead, I dialed the toll-free number at the Department of Corrections that they'd provided me. I was on electronic monitoring with house arrest. I needed permission for a move, as it's called. After a considerable delay, the call center operator finally answered. I explained my situation. She said I couldn't leave without getting the okay from my agent. She said she would contact him. I knew that wouldn't help. No parole agent responds to a phone call or a text message at 2 a.m. unless it involves dead bodies or truckloads of cocaine. So I had to make a difficult choice. Go to the hospital anyway and take my chances, or wait until 6 a.m. when I was allowed to officially go outside. I chose the latter option, hoping my mother wouldn't pass away before I got there. The story has a happy ending. It wasn't a heart attack. My mother was fine. At 6:15 a.m. when I arrived, she went home the next day. After I left the hospital, I phoned my parole agent and asked him if, in the future, I could go to my mother's side in such instances without permission. He said it was a grey area. I'd made the right decision. I also began to ask some bigger questions about my ankle bracelet. If it was supposed to facilitate my reintegration with my family, how could visiting my mother in the hospital during an emergency become a grey area? I had to find out and do something about it. Since that time, I've spent many hours poring over electronic monitoring legislation, reading contracts for putting people on devices, downloading articles about ankle bracelets in Bermuda, Uganda, and South Korea. I've also been interviewing people who've been on ankle bracelets, and while much remains a grey area, there are some distinctive features about electronic monitoring in the USA. Turns out it has several media profiles. For many, EM is about high-living entertainers who wear ankle bracelets in lieu of incarceration. Martha Stewart, Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton and Charlie Sheen have all been on a monitor. And then we have the notorious, a small number among those some 100 to 200,000 people on electronic monitoring each day, who cut off the bracelet and commit a crime which hits the headlines. It's interesting, isn't it? Like the most well-known of those in the USA, Ethan Ebell, who was mistakenly released from prison and put on electronic monitoring. Several weeks later, he removed his device, went to the house of Tom Clements, the director of corrections for the state of Colorado, and shot him dead. Ebell subsequently died in a police shootout. A second media connection with monitors is sex offences. At least 11 states have laws that mandate lifetime GPS for certain categories of sex offences. These laws are typically complemented by exclusion zones, which can be programmed into an EM device. Well, exclusion zones mean a person cannot live, work, or spend extended time within a certain distance of places children frequent: parks, schools, community centres, malls. In Florida, these restrictions have become so severe that a church ministry decided to create a place for such people to live away from urban areas. Minister Dick Witherow paved the way by creating a rural miracle village with no children, where the majority of residents have sex offences. I mean, who even knew that this was a thing? Who even knew that this was the extent that people would have to go to create a safe space for former sex offenders who were wearing electronic tags? It says the dominant reality of EM, electronic monitoring, differs greatly from media images. Considering the USA has 2.3 million people incarcerated and about 4.8 million under probation or parole, EM still remains at the margins of criminal justice policy. Nonetheless, the net has widened appreciably since the first implementation of monitors in the early 1980s. The most well-documented statistical records of people on monitoring refer to those on GPS as a condition of the parole. According to the Bureau of Justice 2010 report, 18,400 people were on parole with GPS. 10,300 of those had sex offences. Other usages are difficult to quantify. Likely the most frequent application of monitors came as a condition of pre-trial release, a substitute for a complement of bail. So what is the situation with electronic monitoring? I mean, do you ever think about it? Because I'd never really given it much thought. I just thought it was given to children who were on, in England we call them antisocial behaviour orders, where a kid is badly behaved and he's given an ASBO and then he's tagged. But it never really occurred to me that there are tens of thousands of adults in the United States who are at the mercy of electronic tagging. And my other feeling is this. If you don't have any money because crime is your income, and you get arrested, and you have no money for rent, and you are tagged and put back into the community, and you have nowhere to live, like, that can't work for you, can it? Like, if you are of no fixed abode, you have no home, if you're homeless or unhoused, then how is electronic tag going to work for you? Those people, I guess, can't be tagged. They have to be incarcerated. The number of possibilities emerge for the future of electronic monitoring. The first is pure and simple net widening. For the companies involved in EM service provision, a number of future markets are possible. These involve imposing more controls on vulnerable populations, people receiving public assistance, those with histories of mental illness or violence, or immigrants. And already, we've seen escalation of controls imposed on some of these cohorts, such as the Florida requirement for those receiving public assistance to submit to urine drug testing. Ankle bracelets might gain some traction as an add-on policy. This extension could come with increasing user fees as well. At present, most people pay $5 to $15 a day to be on the monitor. You have to pay for it? What? I don't know about this. And then finally, there's the question of the criminal justice paradigm. Will electronic monitoring and other technologies continue to perpetuate a paradigm based on punishment, or will the ethos shift to incorporate notions like the rights of the monitored and clear-cut guidelines for implementation? These concerns, it says, become particularly important in light of the revelations of the National Security Agency surveillance systems on electronic media. It says at present, GPS technology does real-time tracking on people sentenced to EM, but the capacity to analyze that data in terms of patterns and possibilities has not yet become part of criminal justice regimes. So what rights should electronically monitored criminals have? And how did the probation service spread its net so wide that now more than half of the people that are in the probation service are being monitored electronically or with GPS? It's very interesting to me. Very interesting. So we can look at this together. You're welcome to chat, send me a message, use backchannel.tv to chat, or you can just use your magic word, wake up word, then say, and then your message with your Echo Show device. And if you have a friend or family member that wants to watch or get involved too, and they haven't got a device, then you can head over to the YouTube channel and watch and make comments there. And you just search for Backchannel, and then you'll see me sitting there like a little puppet on a string. And if you're listening on an Echo speaker, just grab your phone and go to backchannel.tv to join the chat. Once again, that's backchannel.tv for the chat facility right here. It's 10:31 right now on the West Coast, 1:31 Eastern. It's the 7th of December. I'm Anthony Davis, having a little drink, because there's like a sponsored talk this morning. If I was raising money for charity, they would have literally cured world hunger by now. Let's go back to some of your messages. Oh, Deborah, how wonderful to know you're back. Where have you been? It's been like a week. Why would you do that to me? Why would you disappear like that? I thought we were becoming friends. I thought that you were moonlighting from your son's own show, and now you were sharing a little private time with the previous program. I mean, there's a rumor that Hal and I are going to have to do an actual interactive handover in the coming weeks. So I'm actually going to get to meet him, talk to him, share the screen with him momentarily. We'll probably have a split screen situation. Where is Hal, Deborah? Can you tell me where he is? Is he in Koreatown or something? I'm very interested to know where he is when I'm watching him, because I'm a big fan. 10:33 Tuesday morning. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. I feel like I've been talking endlessly, and then I realised that's what the show is. It's just me talking endlessly. Because even when you're messaging me, I'm still reading them out, so that's still me talking endlessly. There is no end to this monologue. Well, until 11 o'clock, of course. So you can message at backchannel.tv, you can message at our YouTube channel, and of course you can message using your voice. Just go to your Echo Show device and ask it to open Backchannel if you haven't already, and then you can introduce yourself with your name and where you're from. And from that point onwards, your Echo Show device will remember your name and where you're from, and you'll be able to just watch anytime you like just by saying open Backchannel. The word dongle? Where did the word dongle come from? Very strange. I don't know where that came from. Carla just said, where did the word dongle come from? I don't know. Didn't come from me. Nothing to do with my dongle. So there's a big story out about Russia today here in the US. Biden expected to derail sanctions to damage Russian economy during a call today. It says Western powers have presented a united front on the eve of a phone call between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin, when the US president is expected to detail punitive measures that would inflict severe damage to Russia's economy if the country invades Ukraine. The US president hosted consultations with the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, and the UK on Monday, during which they discussed their shared concern about the Russian military buildup on Ukraine's borders, according to a readout from the White House. The Biden administration accused Russia of preparing for a military incursion in Ukraine by amassing up to 175,000 troops at the border in a potential deepening of a conflict that began with Moscow's annexation of Crimea in 2014. And the White House said the leaders were calling on Russia to de-escalate tensions and agreed that diplomacy is the only way forward to resolve the conflict. I mean, diplomacy is it's a modern marvel, isn't it? In the days before diplomacy, you would literally fire missiles, drop bombs, or send in boots on the ground. But Biden is, preparing. I guess he has to, doesn't he? He has to prepare for the chance of an actual physical fight. A senior administration official said Biden had consulted with European allies ahead of the call with Putin to make sure he goes into that conversation with allied unity and strong transatlantic solidarity. With respect to financial sanctions, he says, we have had intensive discussions with our European partners about what we would do collectively in the event of a major Russian military escalation in Ukraine. Added the official who spoke ahead of Monday's call between Biden and Washington's European allies. Says, we believe that we have a path forward that would involve substantial economic countermeasures by both the Europeans and the US that would impose significant and severe economic harm on the Russian economy, should they choose to proceed. The US said it will send troops to Eastern Europe if Russia invades Ukraine. Yeah, but the troops are not going to go into Russia. They're going to go into Ukraine. And Putin thinks Ukraine is Russia. and Biden thinks Ukraine is Ukraine, formerly Crimea. Right? So, there's a bit of a confusion over territory here. It's very interesting because, the Cold War never really ended, in my opinion. The Cold War is still very much present, but the moment you put boots on the ground, the moment you send troops, the Cold War becomes war. The days of the Cold War are numbered. It becomes a modern warfare. I mean, the three superpowers, Russia, China, the United States, are all enemies of each other. I mean, and the worry is that if Russia and China join forces, which is very likely, then that's when America needs to be very afraid, right? Because Russia and China have a better relationship than China and US and Russia and the US. And what is the one thing that connects Russia and China, that makes them, likely to be more allied towards the West? Is that they're both effectively fascist dictatorships. You know, that's what this is what the thing about fascism, like the leaders, the dictators, they stick together. They become friends. This is why Trump wanted to befriend Vladimir Putin and thought it was okay for them to be friends, because they both had the same fascist ideals of like running their countries forever, doing away with elections. That's effectively what Putin has done. He's installed himself indefinitely in the role. And it's the same with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Trump wanted to have a friendship with him, and his argument was, well, these people are a lot less likely to be enemies if we befriend them. That's fascism. They are enemies for a reason. They're enemies because of the way they treat their people. They're enemies because they don't allow democratic elections. They're enemies because of corruption and fraud. They're enemies because of persecution and human rights abuses. That's why they're enemies. And Trump's argument was, well, I'll just befriend them. And it's like, are you an idiot? Don't answer that question. The reason that he's okay to befriend them is because he does not see human rights abuses as being bad. Because he happily abuses people's human rights, puts children in cages at the southern border. Going right back to his father owning these tenement buildings, in New York City, and not allowing black people to rent from them. You know, the culture of this hatred and this xenophobia, the selfishness, it runs very deep in that family. It's a crime family. The US has said it would send reinforcements to NATO's eastern flank in response to a Russia invasion of Ukraine, as well as imposing severe new economic measures in a warning to Moscow on the eve of talks between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin. Well, listen, take my advice. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. They don't say these things unless it's going to happen. They will need to send reinforcements to the eastern flank. They will. It says Biden will also make clear to Putin today that the US will not rule out future Ukrainian membership of NATO. The Russian leader has demanded, a senior US official said. Yesterday, Biden spoke to European leaders in preparation for the Putin summit. Afterwards, Boris Johnson said they had agreed to present a united front on Ukraine. I wouldn't trust Boris Johnson as far as I could throw him. The next thing you know, Boris Johnson will be like, oh, I've changed my mind. Actually, I'm on Russia's side. I don't trust him. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken yesterday said he spoke to Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky and reiterated Washington's unwavering support in the face of Russian aggression. Let's not forget how Volodymyr Zelensky managed to get the job as Ukrainian president. Do you remember this story? Such a great story. Carla, do you remember? He was a comedian and impersonator of the previous president. He was on like a show like Saturday Night Live. And he used to, because he looked a bit like the previous president, he was an impersonator. He impersonated the previous president as a comedian. And it was very funny and it was very good. And then they were all so dissatisfied with the previous president that he thought, well, you know something, I might as well run to be the president. And he won. I mean, the next craziest thing is like the United States could vote to have like a reality TV host be their president. Oh, hang on. I mean, this is the world that we live in now. where the leaders. Ronald Reagan was an actor. He was a matinee idol. Reagan was a matinee idol. In the movies in the 1950s, you remember when Marty McFly goes back to the future in 1955, and at the cinema in the town, there's a Ronald Reagan movie showing, and he says, "Oh, who's the president?" In 1985, I think a homeless person says it to him, and he goes, "Ronald Reagan," and he goes, "The actor?" Reagan was chosen to be the president effectively because he was a good communicator. He was an actor. He could learn speeches. He could make it sound like he had empathy. And, there's a lot of writing to suggest that it was the big banks, the Merrill Lynches and the Morgan Stanleys that were actually bankrolling the Reagan presidency. And there's a very famous scene where Reagan is giving a speech on a balcony, and a guy from behind steps up to him, and you can hear him on mic, and he says, "Speed it up a bit." And you'll never guess who that guy is. He was a banker. He was like the head of one of the major US banks. Who tells the president to speed it up a bit? Unless they have got some kind of control over them. You should look it up, Carla. It's very interesting. The moment that the banker tells the president to speed it up. And that really is the Reagan presidency in a nutshell, being controlled and operated by the banks. And that's why he deregulated, and that's why he reduced taxation on the wealthy. And that's why, that blueprint is the modern GOP, isn't it? It's what Trump did. Big tax breaks to the rich, because they made up this concept called trickle-down economics to convince that working people that they would benefit from tax breaks for the rich. And it's not a thing. They made it up. It's a little bit like the cholesterol scale, when it says that if you're over 200, then that's high cholesterol. Who made up that scale? Who invented that? It was the pharmaceutical companies that invented that. The people that make statins, the cholesterol-reducing drug. They were the ones that set the bar through their own research on what is considered to be high cholesterol. And for that reason, the cholesterol-reducing drug is the most profitable drug in the history of pharmaceuticals. It makes around $50 billion in profit every year. But, I always say this about Big Pharma. They have a two-pronged approach to medicine in a capitalist environment. They'll make you the medicine that works because the statins do reduce your cholesterol. I went on a statin briefly, and my cholesterol did drop. So it's not that the drug doesn't work. It's a bit like the vaccines. The vaccines work, but in a capitalist environment, these companies can make a fortune out of it. They are allowed to. That's the system in which we operate. And in fact, if you were to add up the profit that has been made by the vaccine companies in the last 2 years, you could afford to vaccinate the entire population of planet Earth. There's 7.8 billion people on planet Earth. And this journalist, Umair Haq, I read his stuff every day, he worked out that there's something like $38 billion of profit has been made by the vaccine companies in the last year. 38 billion. And he said that's more than enough money to vaccinate every human on the planet. So how do we qualify all of these things? And this is why there are conspiracy theorists out there that think that anything like that is pharmaceutical based is like bad because there's profit attached. And my point that I'm making to you, going back to the days of Ronald Reagan and even before Reagan, is that profit was designed to work alongside pharmaceutical. The pharmaceutical world is a profitable industry. one of the most profitable industries next to, military equipment. So we should not be scared of statins because they do reduce our cholesterol. You just have to ask yourself, is it bad for me to have high cholesterol? And you have to look at all of the factors. You have to look at your family history, and you have to look at your blood pressure, and you have to consider there are other factors involved because, there's a thing called good cholesterol as well as bad cholesterol. All I know is that when I stopped eating meat and dairy, my cholesterol went from 228 to 186. Because it's possible to fix these things through diet. But you just have to be prepared to make these sacrifices, And if you're not prepared to make the sacrifices, then take the pill. Just giving my little air conditioning a blast. That's why it sounds a bit strange in here all of a sudden. Just in case you were wondering, what is that noise? Is it the FBI coming to take him away for saying too much about Ronald Reagan? I would like to watch a Ronald Reagan film. I don't think he was a particularly bad actor. I mean, politically, he was a bad actor. But professionally, I think he was probably a very acceptable actor. Wasn't one of the great actors, He wasn't one of the greats, but I think he was a sound actor. I mean, he was a good-looking man. And I think a lot of the retrospective analysis of presidents and prime ministers is the period in history that they reigned over, because Reagan had kind of a good time of it, didn't he? I mean, it was peacetime. It was before the invasion of Iraq. It was after Vietnam. It was effectively peacetime. It was before 9/11. There wasn't, during Reagan's premiership, there wasn't any kind of war that could have in any way devalued his presidency. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. My knowledge of U.S. history is not that wide, but I seem to remember that that was like a period of peacetime. And so he focused on the economics, and he focused on the anti-drugs campaign. Do you remember when Nancy Reagan invited all the kind of anti-drug, in fact, people in England, there was a whole anti-drugs movement in England called the Just Say No campaign, and they were invited to the Reagan White House to meet with Nancy Reagan. Nancy, and that was the 80s. And then, he forged that special relationship with Margaret Thatcher in the UK. They were a very close bonded conservative movement between the two of them. They had similar ideals. They had similar views on economics. And I disagree with most of it. But it was in peacetime, and therefore people look back on these periods in peacetime and they go, well, that was, it was an okay time. It was the same in England. Our Prime Minister was John Major for many years before, after Margaret Thatcher. And again, he, enjoyed a very peaceful time. And he was a very thoughtful politician because he had the time to think. There was only during Margaret Thatcher's, reign in England, there was the Falkland Island invasion. The Falklands had already been taken by the British years ago, and the Falkland Islanders tried to take it back. And so she basically reinvaded her own place in the South Atlantic, sunk a warship called the Belgrano. How do I remember this stuff? Do you remember the sinking of the Belgrano? It was going in the opposite. It was a frigate. It was a Falkland frigate, and it was going in the opposite direction when Margaret Thatcher decided to sink it. And that was an event that was considered to be one of the worst moments of the invasion, the sinking of the Belgrano. And she never lived that down, really, because the ship was retreating when it was sunk. Fascinating. I mean, there is a lesson here about, like, us learning our political and social history. Because every decision and every thought and every opinion that we form about modern history can be based on historical events. And if the more we know about history past, the better placed we are to make a judgment on modern history. And I really feel that. I feel like the way I look at things now is all based on the fact that I've been alive for this many years, and therefore I have a point of reference. I've really enjoyed our chats today. You've been non-stop with your comms. Thank you very much for chatting with me. Deborah says, keep talking, you are great. I'm busy with errands this week, stocking up for possible snowstorm now that I'm all tucked in and ready for the snow. Well, you're on the East Coast, of course. It's getting very cold. It was snowing in Cleveland. When I went to Cleveland, it was snowing. Amazing. Anyway, it's thrilling to know that you are, tuning in and ready for your boy. Thank you. Oh, that's right. It was snowing in Hawaii. Yeah, this is climate change presenting itself. Thank you for joining me. I'm Anthony Davis. That was The Anthony Davis Show. I shall return tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific. That's noon Eastern. Stay with Backchannel and don't forget to join in and interact, because this is the only place you can for your pal Hal, even your Hal pal. Next.